Saturday morning in the 1970s was a different world. You dragged yourself out of bed before your parents, poured a bowl of something neon, and sat 2 feet from the television while the networks threw everything they had at you. Some of it was genius, some of it was baffling, and some of it was so strange you still can't fully explain it to anyone who wasn't there. Here are the 15 weirdest cartoons 1970s kids can't forget. Cartoon 15, Lidsville, 1971. Lidsville was a live-action production from Sid and Marty Krofft.
Shake! The evil eye!
Right, boss, one evil eye coming up!
One evil eye coming up!
The Canadian brothers who spent the 1970s producing some of the most psychedelic children's television in broadcast history. The show premiered on ABC on September 11th, 1971, and ran for 17 episodes through January 1973. In it, a boy named Mark falls into a magician's hat and finds himself in a land entirely populated by living hats. Sentient, anthropomorphized hats of every variety, from cowboy hats to berets to top hats, each one a separate character with a distinct personality. The villain was a wicked sorcerer named Hoodoo, played by Charles Nelson Riley, who wore an enormous black witch's hat and spent most of his time failing to catch Mark and the friendly hat people who had befriended him.
Now, the great Hoodoo will perform a feat of prestidigitation.
The Krofft brothers had already done H.R. Pufnstuf in 1969, a show in which a boy falls into a magical land of giant talking mushrooms and friendly creatures. And Lidsville was essentially the same template applied to haberdashery. Every character was a hat. The hats walked and talked and had full emotional lives. The world they inhabited was designed to look like an enormous magical hat shop. Nothing about it was ever explained or justified. Charles Nelson Riley was not a subtle performer, and Hoodoo was not a subtle villain. He was enormous, theatrical, and completely committed to a role that involved him wearing a witch's hat in a world where hats were people. The show ran for one production season, but aired in reruns for years after, ensuring that an entire generation of children
Master Twirly's coming about! He's making his move!
had the experience of watching Charles Nelson Riley terrorize a kingdom of animated millinery. Cartoon 14, The Brady Kids, 1972. When the Brady Bunch became a hit on ABC in the early 1970s, the network and Filmation Productions decided that what the show needed was an animated spin-off in which the Brady children were cartoons. This was a reasonable idea if you stopped thinking about it immediately. The result was The Brady Kids, which premiered on ABC on September 9th, 1972, and ran for 2 seasons until August 1973. The show stripped away all of the adults. Mike and Carol Brady were gone. Alice the housekeeper was gone. The 6 children were left on their own to have animated adventures.
Managed to do that?
I don't think it was the kids.
Which apparently required a talking mynah bird named Marlin, who had magical powers, a pair of twin pandas named Ping and Pong, whose origin was never addressed, and occasional time travel that allowed the Brady kids to interact with Superman, Wonder Woman, the Lone Ranger, and the Abominable Snowman, among others. The children were voiced by the actual Brady Bunch cast members: Barry Williams, Maureen McCormick, Christopher Knight, Eve Plum, Mike Lookinland, and Susan Olsen, which gave the show a certain authenticity while simultaneously making it clear that the children could do nothing interesting on their own and required a magic bird and multiple DC Comics superheroes to generate any dramatic momentum. Filmation's animation style was economical to a degree that became its own distinctive quality.
Well, at least you accomplished something.
Look, magic won't help. Let's go see about fixing that balloon.
Characters walked in loops, mouths moved in generic rhythms, backgrounds were reused without modification, It ran for 33 episodes and was the closest the Brady Bunch ever came to science fiction. Cartoon 13, The Funky Phantom, 1971. The Funky Phantom premiered on ABC on September 11, 1971, and was Hanna-Barbera's sincere attempt to produce Scooby-Doo again with a different twist. The formula was the same: a group of teenagers, a comedy animal sidekick, mysteries, and chases. The twist was that the comedy animal sidekick was replaced by the ghost of a Revolutionary War soldier named Mudsie, who had hidden in a grandfather clock in 1776 to escape the British.
The truck driver! He was tied up behind the drapes all the time.
Died inside it, and then been released from the clock 200 years later by 3 teenagers who stumbled upon the building during a rainstorm. The teenagers were Skip, April, and Augie. They had a cat named Boo. Mudsie, voiced by Daws Butler, who also voiced Yogi Bear, Quick Draw McGraw, and Huckleberry Hound, was a round, cheerful, vaguely cowardly patriot who said things like, "By the by," and had no memory of anything that had happened since the 1700s. His spectral companion was a ghost cat named Elmo. Together, this group of teenagers, a living cat, a ghost soldier, and a ghost cat, traveled the country solving mysteries. The show ran for 17 episodes across its single production season. Mudsie's origin: a man who hid in a clock to avoid the British in 1776.
Well, thanks for the offer, Mr. Higgins, but I don't think that we can... Hold it! I have another brilliant idea.
Died inside it, and then emerged to solve mysteries with teenagers 2 centuries later, was treated as completely unremarkable. He was simply there, in a tricorn hat, confused about everything that had happened since King George III was on the throne. Cartoon 12, Goober and the Ghost Chasers, 1973. If The Funky Phantom was Hanna-Barbera's attempt to do Scooby-Doo with a ghost, Goober and the Ghost Chasers was their attempt to do Scooby-Doo with a dog who turned invisible. The show premiered on ABC on September 8, 1973, and ran for 16 episodes. The main character was Goober, a green dog who became transparent, leaving only his floating hat and collar visible.
Fantastic, Goober. Now we're all safe.
Whenever he was frightened, which was constantly. His human companions were ghost-chasing reporters who traveled the country investigating supernatural phenomena, encountering actual ghosts and spirits who were real rather than criminals in disguise. Goober was voiced by Paul Winchell, a legendary voice actor who also provided the original voice of Tigger in Disney's Winnie the Pooh productions, as well as Dick Dastardly, Gargamel and the Smurfs, and dozens of other characters across his career. In the role of Goober, Winchell imitated Daws Butler's distinctive voice for Snagglepuss, which made Goober sound almost exactly like Snagglepuss if Snagglepuss were a frightened green dog who could turn invisible. 8 of the show's 16 episodes featured the actual cast members of the Partridge Family.
Oh, I got an idea. His idea is one idea I'm not gonna like.
Susan Day, Danny Bonaduce, Brian Forster, and Suzanne Crew, voicing animated versions of themselves as guest characters. No explanation was offered for their regular appearances in a parallel animated universe. The episodes simply had them in it. Cartoon 11, Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, 1973. Sigmund and the Sea Monsters was a live-action Sid and Marty Krofft production that premiered on NBC on September 8, 1973, and ran for 29 episodes across 2 seasons through October 18, 1975. It was the first Krofft Saturday morning production to run for more than 1 season, which suggests either that the audience responded to it unusually well, or that NBC had nowhere else to put the time slot.
Hey, you got back fast. Where's John?
Shh. Now, Zelda's nephew's outside.
The premise was simple. Sigmund was a sea monster who was different from other sea monsters. While his family and the rest of his kind were frightening and aggressive, Zygmunt was gentle, friendly, and warm. His family, particularly his brothers Blurp and Slurp and his villainous Uncle Gotcha, threw him out of their cave for being insufficiently monstrous, and he was befriended by two human boys named Johnny and Scott, who hid him in their beach clubhouse and kept his existence secret. Zygmunt was performed by Billy Barty, one of the most prolific costumed character performers in Croft history, who also played Sparky the Firefly in The Bugaloos and other creatures across multiple Croft productions. The show shared its universe with other Croft productions.
I wonder what they brought for breakfast.
An episode in the show's second season featured an appearance by H.R. Pufnstuf, the magical dragon who had headlined the Crofts' first series. The second season also introduced a character named Sheldon, a sea genie played by Rip Taylor, whose magic created complications for Zygmunt's attempts to remain undetected. Margaret Hamilton, who had played the Wicked Witch of the West in the 1939 film The Wizard of Oz, appeared in multiple episodes as Zelda the Sea Witch. The show was ultimately a comedy about a creature trying to survive in a world that didn't understand him, which was the same premise that drove most of the Crofts' best work. Cartoon 10, Josie and the Pussycats in Outer Space, 1972. Josie and the Pussycats had been a Saturday morning cartoon since 1970.
Dumb spaceship yet, Valerie?
Stop moaning. If it weren't for you, dear sister, we wouldn't be in this predicament.
A Hanna-Barbera production about an all-girl rock band who traveled the world solving mysteries, based on an Archie Comics property. By 1972, adventures on Earth were apparently no longer enough. The network decided what Josie and the Pussycats needed was to go to space. Josie and the Pussycats in Outer Space premiered on CBS on September 9th, 1972, and ran for 16 episodes through January 27, 1973. The premise, Josie and the Pussycats, along with their friends Alexandra, Melody, Valerie, Alan, and Alexander, are accidentally blasted into outer space on a rocket and spend the rest of the series drifting through the galaxy, landing on various planets, solving problems, and attempting to find a way back to Earth.
Clowning around, right, Alan?
Quiet, alien.
Hey, who are you calling an...
They are accompanied by a white alien creature named Bleep, who communicates only in bleeping sounds and becomes the group's de facto mascot and mascot replacement for Pussyfoot the cat, who was not present in this version. The central dramatic tension of the series was that the group was lost in space and wanted to go home. They never went home. The series ended with the characters presumably still floating through the galaxy, having solved 16 episodes worth of alien crises without ever resolving the situation the entire series was built around. Saturday morning cartoons of the era rarely ended with resolution. It was simply expected. Cartoon 9, Partridge Family, 2020 AD, 1974. The Partridge Family ran on ABC as a live-action sitcom about a widowed mother and her 5 children.
Never seems to be around when I need him. What do you want, Mom? I'll do it. You can't. You're too young.
Who formed a pop group and toured the country in a painted school bus from 1970 to 1974. When the live-action series was canceled, Hanna-Barbera approached CBS with a proposal to continue the franchise as an animated series. CBS agreed. Then, for reasons that have been discussed but never fully explained, it was decided that the Partridge Family would live in the year 2200. Partridge Family 2020 AD premiered on CBS on September 7, 1974, and ran for 16 episodes through December the 21st, 1974. The family's transportation was no longer a painted school bus, but a rocket ship. They no longer lived in a modest suburban house, but in a futuristic dwelling.
Sunspot, he's terrible. You want me to tell him? No.
If you keep Sunspot in the act, he'll ruin you.
Their world strongly resembled the Jetsons' world, which was not coincidental. Hanna-Barbera had originally pitched CBS on an updated Jetsons series. CBS had declined and requested Partridge Family instead, and the Jetsons' production design was adapted rather than rebuilt. Danny Bonaduce, Brian Forster, and Suzanne Crowe reprised their own roles in animated form, while Shirley Jones and David Cassidy were replaced by Joan Gerber and Chuck McClendon for most of the run, though Susan Day provided Laurie's voice for 2 episodes. Mickey Dolenz of the Monkees had recurring roles in the series, playing multiple characters across episodes. The family still played music and solved problems wherever they went.
You did? Oh, well, I was also gonna tune it.
The problems were now futuristic. Nobody asked why they were in the year 2200. The show simply started there. Cartoon 8, Speed Buggy, 1973. Speed Buggy was a 1973 Hanna-Barbera production that combined 2 of the decade's dominant comedy formats, the talking animal companion and the race car, into a single character, a talking racing car with a speech impediment. The show premiered on CBS on September 8, 1973, and ran for 16 episodes. Speed Buggy, called Speedy by his human companions, was a bright orange dune buggy with oversized eyes on his hood and a personality that combined genuine sweetness with an affection for speed that exceeded his common sense.
Who put the antifreeze in my carburetor? Yeah.
He sputtered and stammered when he spoke, which the animators used as a comedy device throughout the series. His human crew consisted of Tinker, the mechanically gifted young man who maintained him, Mark, the driver, and Debbie, who was competent in situations where the others were not. Together, they entered racing competitions and had adventures along the way. The combination of automotive racing culture with the Scooby-Doo formula generated a show more coherent than most of its contemporaries. What made Speed Buggy unusual rather than simply familiar was the specificity of the car's characterization. He was not simply a vehicle who could talk. He had feelings. He could be hurt. He felt genuine attachment to his crew. The visual device of giving the car eyes and an expressive front grille
Big race today.
meant the animation team had to treat him as a character rather than a prop, and the voice performance, provided by Mel Blanc, brought a warmth to a talking car that the premise didn't strictly require. Cartoon 7, The Hair Bear Bunch, 1971. The Hair Bear Bunch broadcast under the alternate title We Do Things Our Way on some affiliates, premiered on CBS on September 11th, 1971, and ran for 16 episodes through September 2nd, 1972. The show followed 3 bears, Hair Bear, Booby Bear, and Square Bear, who lived in a zoo called Wonderland Zoo in a cage that contained, concealed behind a moving bookcase, a fully furnished apartment complete with a couch, a television set, kitchen appliances, and a motorcycle.
What's wrong, officer?
Yeah, what's with the search, right? We weren't going too fast in the day there, was we?
The bears had stolen or obtained, by means the show never addressed, everything in the apartment. They had assembled an entire domestic life inside their zoo enclosure and spent most of each episode either going out on the town or attempting to prevent the zookeeper, Mr. Eustace P. Peevely, and his bumbling assistant Botch from discovering that their cage was not what it appeared to be. The show's moral universe was entirely on the side of the bears. Mr. Peevely was consistently depicted as foolish and ineffective. The bears were depicted as clever, resourceful, and entirely justified in whatever they were doing. Audiences were expected to root for animals conducting an ongoing deception of their supposed custodians, which they did. The Hair Bear Bunch was produced by Hanna-Barbera and directed by Charles A. Nichols.
Hey, listen, this rider says the coast is all clear.
Goodbye, folks. Come again.
The show's visual design was more detailed than much of the era's animation. The interior of the bear's secret apartment was rendered with consistent care across episodes, which meant that viewers who paid attention could catalog its contents and notice when new items appeared. Cartoon 6, Jabberjaw, 1976. Jaws was released in 1975 and became the first film to gross more than $100 million at the American box office, introducing the concept of the summer blockbuster and making sharks the most culturally discussed animals in the country. Hanna-Barbera's response to this cultural moment was Jabberjaw. Jabberjaw premiered on ABC on September 11, 1976, and ran for 16 episodes through December 18.
Let's get out of here!
1976, with reruns continuing through 1978. The show was set in the year 2076, 100 years in the future, when humanity had built cities beneath the ocean inside protective biodomes. In this underwater civilization, a teenage rock band called the Neptunes, Biff on lead guitar, Shelley on tambourine, Bubbles on keyboard, and Clamhead on bass, performed concerts and had adventures, accompanied by their drummer, a 15-foot talking great white shark named Jabberjaw. Jabberjaw was voiced by Frank Welker, who based the character entirely on Curly Howard of the Three Stooges, including the vocal patterns and the catchphrase of getting no respect, borrowed wholesale from Rodney Dangerfield. Jabberjaw played drums despite having no hands.
If you can prove you're space creatures.
Now you two did it. We're really in trouble.
He walked upright. He spoke fluent English. He was the target of shark ejectors, automated robot devices standard in many of the underwater cities' establishments, programmed to remove sharks from the premises, which provided a running source of physical comedy across the series. The show was created by Joe Ruby and Ken Spears. It was a direct response to Jaws, a direct descendant of Scooby-Doo, and a direct continuation of Hanna-Barbera's formula of teenagers, with a comedy mascot solving crimes, all combined into a Jaws parody set a century underwater in a world where sharks could play drums. Cartoon 5, Hong Kong Phooey, 1974. Hong Kong Phooey premiered on ABC on September the 7th, 1974. And ran for 16 episodes through September the 4th, 1976, including reruns. It was a Hanna-Barbera production that asked a very specific question. What if a janitor at a police station was secretly a kung fu superhero? The janitor was Penrod Pooch, called Penry, a mild-mannered dog who worked for the police department, listened to the radio communications of police officers from inside his filing cabinet, and transformed himself into Hong Kong Phooey, master of kung fu, by changing into a yellow costume and climbing out of the filing cabinet. He invariably got stuck in the filing cabinet, which his cat Spot had to open for him. Hong Kong Phooey was voiced by Scatman Crothers, the same Scatman Crothers who appeared in The Shining and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. In 1974, he was voicing a dog in a kung fu costume.
According to my Hong Kong book of Kung Fu, pickpockets could be hiding anywhere.
Who got stuck in a filing cabinet, doing so with complete commitment and genuine warmth. The central joke was that Hong Kong Phooey was a terrible superhero. His cat Spot, a tabby who never spoke, was consistently the one who actually resolved each episode's crisis. Phooey received all the credit. Spot accepted this without visible distress. The dynamic between a thoroughly incompetent hero and a quietly competent animal gave the show a personality distinct from the other talking animal cartoons surrounding it in the schedule. Cartoon 4, Inch High Private Eye, 1973. Inch High Private Eye was a Hanna-Barbera production that premiered on NBC on September 8, 1973, and ran for 13 episodes through January 26, 1974.
I think I cannot stop you from stealing the fabulous Pink Lady, correct?
Correct.
That's two corrects.
The show's entire premise was contained in its title. The main character, Inch High, was a private detective who was 1 inch tall. He worked for the Pinkerton Detective Agency, a parody of Pinkerton National Detective Agency, and solved cases that his small size complicated in every imaginable way. He was voiced by Lenny Weinrib. His companions were his niece Lori, her boyfriend Gator, and a dog named Braveheart. The cases they investigated ranged across the standard spectrum of 1970s animated mystery. Thieves, villains with elaborate plans, stolen objects. The comedy came from Inch High's physical relationship to his environment, getting inside a locked room through the keyhole, riding insects as transportation.
1 minute, please.
Yes. Who is this?
Being in constant danger from ordinary household objects that presented no challenge to the other characters. He was, despite his size, confident and decisive, which the show treated as admirable rather than delusional. Inch High. Private Eye distinguished itself through the sustained logical commitment to exploring what being 1 inch tall actually meant for a working detective in a world sized for everyone else. And it did so in 13 episodes that kept the premise's internal logic more consistent than most of its contemporaries managed. Cartoon 3, Star Trek, the Animated Series, 1973. Star Trek, the animated series, premiered on NBC on September 8, 1973.
Food and intelligent, so you can appreciate the incredible value I'm offering.
And ran for 22 episodes through October 12, 1974. It had the same writers, the same voice cast. William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, Nichelle Nichols, George Takei, and James Doohan, and the same creative ambition as the original live-action series. Walter Koenig's Chekhov did not appear as a regular because the production could not afford to add him. Scripts were written by many of the same contributors to the original series, including D.C. Fontana and Larry Niven, and addressed genuine science fiction concepts, alternate timelines, parallel universes, first contact scenarios, ethical dilemmas about the nature of life. The animation was very simple. The characters moved in the limited, economical way that all Filmation productions moved.
Ship had perfect operational status before we entered orbit here. It's that planet causing all our trouble.
The Enterprise flew through recycled space footage. The gap between the intellectual ambition of the writing and the visual simplicity of the production was one of the most distinctive qualities of the series. A show that would regularly deliver a compelling philosophical argument about the nature of consciousness through a character whose mouth moved in the same 4-frame cycle used to animate breakfast cereal commercials. It won the Daytime Emmy Award for Outstanding Entertainment Children's Series in 1975, the first Emmy ever awarded to a Star Trek production, and introduced a generation of children to science fiction as a genre capable of genuine moral seriousness. Cartoon 2, The Robonic Stooges, 1977. The Robonic Stooges premiered as a segment of The Skatebirds on CBS on October 1st, 1977.
What are you doing? I want to make a fire, and nobody's invented matches yet. You're rubbing 2 sticks of dynamite together, you ninny.
And was later broadcast as a standalone series. The premise combined the Three Stooges with the $6 Million Man in a way that was either inspired or horrifying, depending on one's relationship to both properties. Moe, Larry, and Curly had been given bionic implants, cybernetic enhancements that gave them superhuman abilities, and were now working as secret agent superheroes who reported to a mystery boss they could only communicate with via a rotary phone hidden inside Curly's stomach. The Stooges were voiced by Paul Winchell as Curly, Frank Welker as Moe, and Joe Baker as Larry. Welker's Frank Welker's Moe impression was functional. Winchell had already played Curly-adjacent characters in Jabberjaw and brought appropriate energy to the role.
Robonic Stooges, away!
Their bionic abilities were used in combination with their original slapstick dynamic, meaning that the show offered the unlikely spectacle of characters with advanced cybernetic enhancements continuing to accidentally injure each other, misunderstand their missions, and generally behave in ways that made their secret agent status difficult to maintain. The show ran for 25 episodes and was syndicated after its CBS run. The Stooges had been comedians. They became comedic cyborg secret agents. The premise operated with complete sincerity, which was the only way it could have worked. Cartoon 1, Lidsville. Wait, let's finish with Bigfoot and Wild Boy, 1977. Bigfoot and Wild Boy was a live-action Sid and Marty Krofft production.
Wild boy, Kalamala, Norcay.
Right. We better find out what's happening.
That premiered as a segment of the Krofft Super Show on ABC on September 10, 1977. It later aired as a standalone series. The show starred Ray Young as Bigfoot, the legendary cryptid, presented here not as a mysterious creature, but as a heroic wilderness guardian, and Joseph Butcher as Wild Boy, a young human child who had been raised by Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest wilderness. Together, they protected people in the wild from various threats, functioning as a crime-fighting duo operating entirely outside any institutional framework. The show's approach to its premise was completely earnest. Bigfoot was not played for comedy. He was a wise, powerful guardian of the natural world who had chosen to raise a human child.
Wild boy, Corso.
Wild Boy, dressed in animal skins, ran very fast and could communicate with animals. Together, they faced threats with the calm competence of professionals. The Kroffts had spent the decade producing shows where strangeness was the whole point. Hats who were people, sea monsters who were rejected by their families, ghost soldiers from 1776. Bigfoot and Wild Boy was strange in a different register. It took its impossible premise completely seriously and delivered it as straightforward adventure. A child raised by Bigfoot, helping Bigfoot solve crimes in the Pacific Northwest, treated as completely unremarkable. In 1977, on a Saturday morning, that was simply the world. If you made it all the way to number 1, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. There is a lot more where this came from.